just wanted to make a video of me telling Rosie's birth story, just because I've been wanting to share it with people because so many people have been such a big part of her coming to our house, and I've tried to write it down, but it's kind of a challenge, just because it was so, it's just a lot to process. So I just thought I would record a video of me telling the story like I was sitting down with you, and you asked me how it went, and I can talk about it fine, but somehow writing it just comes out kind of weird. So anyway, I just wanted to do it this way, that way I can maybe write it down later. So anyway, so the Monday before she was born, I had been in touch with Bundle of Hope. We had been matched only a week before, and I knew that we needed to write the check for the first half of the payment, because the first half is due when you're placed, and then the second half is due when the baby is born. So I had been in touch with them, and I had scheduled to go in to write the check on Tuesday morning, so the next day. So I went in the next day, and I wrote the check, and a girl who works there, her name is Kristen, she was there, and she said, "Oh, we have you coming in tomorrow morning to write the check, not today." And she's like, "But you can write it, that's fine, but Glenda's not here, so you won't be able to talk to her." So I was like, all right. So I wrote the check, and I asked some questions about the birth mom and all that stuff, and she said, it looks so great, and it just looks like a great situation. So I was excited, and on my way out, Glenda came in, and she said, "Oh, well, you already have an appointment for tomorrow, Wednesday, at 9. Why don't you come back then, and we can talk more about the adoption?" And I thought, well, that's great. You don't get a lot of FaceTime with these people in general, just because they're so busy, and May was a particularly busy month for them. So I was like, all right, that's great. So Tuesday night to Wednesday morning, I, for whatever reason, could not sleep a wink. I wasn't nervous or anything like that, but I just couldn't sleep, and it was one of those things where it was like my spirit was not resting. So I did a lot of praying, and of course, my brain has been adoption centered for a long time now. So I was just praying and praying for the birth mom, and just wondering if something was happening then, and I did not get a lot of sleep. But anyway, regardless, I loaded the kids up on Wednesday morning and took them in to the office of Bundle of Hope, that's just down the street from here, and we waited there outside for about 20 minutes because Glenda was a little bit late, and she had pulled up, but she was still on the phone and talking, and so I wound up just loading we had actually gotten out, the kids and I, so I loaded them back in the car, and I sort of motioned to her that, like, we're probably just gonna head home unless she really needed to talk about something, because obviously she was busy. And she told me to wait, so I sat in the car, and she came over, and she was like, "Well, we have some bad news about your placement." She said the birth mom had her baby last night, and she decided to keep him, and she named him Joshua. And so I was a little bit taken aback. I wasn't really upset, though, because we really had been praying very fervently about that scenario happening. And so I don't know, I was just like, all right, well, that's that. But then Glenda said, she's like, "But we actually have another birth mother that you can be praying for, that she is being induced tonight, Wednesday night, and we want to place her with you guys." So apparently this birth mom, who I'm going to call Sierra, she had decided that going through portfolios was overwhelming and too difficult. So she asked that Glenda choose a family, and so Glenda wanted to place her and her baby with us. And so I asked more about Sierra, and what her age was and her situation. It was her first baby. She thought it was a boy. And she'd just been in a very difficult situation, and she was getting out of it, and this is part, and giving the baby for adoption was part of getting out of her situation, and part of getting into a safer situation, and getting the baby into a safe situation. So her story just really touched my heart, and I remember looking at Glenda and saying, I said, just let her know we want to help her whether we get a baby or not, just because it is a really difficult situation, and we want to support her and let her know that she is loved no matter what. And so Sierra was to be induced that night, so we waited all day. It seemed very unsure whether or not we were really the family, because we got some information that the safe house where she was staying was trying to talk her into keeping the baby, which we're like, okay, it was just very confusing, and we're like, should we prepare for a baby? I don't know. So anyway, but we got a call to go in, and she said that that she would like to meet us, and so we went to the hospital, and from what the agency told me, my expectation going in was that I was going to meet the birth mom like one time and talk with her a little bit, and then wait for the baby to be born, and then we would have a baby, and that was it, and we would have a baby boy. That's what I also thought too. So, but we get there, and Glenda takes me into Sierra's room, and I see her, and she's so small, like curled up on this bed. She was obviously already in a lot of pain from the induction and labor process, and I remember giving her a hug, and she says, I can't do this alone. I can't do this. I need you. And I think it was hard to tell at the moment. I thought she meant the, like raising the baby, but I think looking back, I think she also meant the labor, and because of her situation, nobody she knew that she was there having the baby, and so Glenda asked if it was okay if Sam came in too, while to be there, and she said, oh sure. So I went out and got Sam, and we spent the night there with Sierra, and we bonded very quickly. Within the first hour, I was feeding her ice chips and rubbing her back, and Sam was moving her around in her bed to get her comfortable. She was really uncomfortable. She hadn't had any pain medication yet, so she was just in a lot of pain, and her contractions were not all that regular, and it was just very hard. And so around 2:30, I think they gave her some pain medication, and she was completely out. She slept for I think 5 hours after that, and she was still in labor, but I guess the pain medication really helped. It wasn't an epidural yet, but she slept, and anytime they came to check her or something, she always asked for me, and I sat right there by her and held her hand, and she squeezed my hand whenever she was in any pain. And gosh, it was quite an experience. Never assisted anyone through labor before, and it was quite an experience. So once that first dose of pain medication wore off, she did request for an epidural, and at this point she was probably about 6 centimeters, so she had slept through most of the labor, it seemed. And so they placed an epidural, and I remember when they came to place it, everybody had to leave, but she said, but Heather can stay, and they're like, no, everybody has to leave. And she was like, come right back, please come right back, and I was like, I promise, we'll just be right outside the door. And so we came right back, and I don't know, it was just very, I don't know, it was very, very close experience. I felt almost like I was her mom, and I was taking care of her and advocating for her, and you know, getting, you know, calling the nurses when she needed things and everything. So after the epidural was placed, her contractions were sort of regular. They were about every 3 minutes apart, but then around 1 o'clock on Wednesday they came to check her, and her contractions weren't as regular anymore, and she wasn't progressing at all. You know, I mean, nothing was coming down, nothing was so, and they had already broken her water at this point, and so they were just saying, you know, just so you're aware, it's looking like you're probably headed for a C-section, you know, just because you're not progressing. And they're like, you might progress, you might, you know, it might work out great, but, you know, just to sort of put that out there. And Sierra was devastated. She's like, I don't want a C-section, this isn't what I want, everything is going wrong. And she really expressed that she really felt like she was failing. And, you know, we did everything in our power to reassure her that this happens to lots of people, especially in conjunction with inductions. And we were able to tell her about Sam's sister who this happened to, and, you know, and that really encouraged her. We actually showed her a picture of Liam and Eva's cousins, and just saying, you know, the first one she had a C-section, but the second one she didn't need one, and, you know, we just said there's all sorts of reasons why this could not be working, and it's nothing to do with you or, you know, what you're doing wrong. You know, this just happens sometimes. And she seemed to feel a little better about it, but she was just so scared about the surgery. And I know a lot of moms who have had this happen, an unplanned C-section. It's just a huge surprise that doesn't necessarily feel right. And I think that's what she was really feeling. And so about an hour later they came back and said, you know, it's still optional at this point. You know, we don't have to do an emergency C-section, but if by X amount of time you haven't progressed and you haven't delivered, you know, it's going to turn into an emergency C-section. And so they're like, but you're, you know, totally, she says, you know, maybe by that point you'll have progressed. She's like, or you can elect to have the C-section now. And at this point her contractions had slowed to about 6.5 minutes apart, so they had actually slowed way down, and she was tired and she was ready to be done, I think. And so she said that she would go ahead with the C-section, and I think that was the best decision at the time, just to have it done. And so, and we had been there for like 17 hours, and we were all exhausted. I hadn't slept for 2 nights, because remember, like, Tuesday to Wednesday I hadn't slept, and then Monday to Tuesday, anyway, I hadn't slept for 2 nights. So I was exhausted as well, and they told Sierra, they said, you know, you're allowed to have one person in the OR with you. Do you want anybody in there with you? And she, without missing a beat, she's like, I want Heather in there with me. I need somebody with me. So I got my little suit on, and that's when things started to sort of get a little bit unusual for me, because my expectation was that once the baby was born, then I would go and hold the baby and bond with the baby, and that when I looked at the baby I would see my adopted baby, and I thought it was going to be a boy. So just before I went in for the C-section, Kristen had been there with us the whole time. The poor thing, she was 8 months pregnant. So, and she'd been there with us as well, just to make sure everything was going well, but she had to go home. She said, well, once the baby is born, I'm actually going to go home for the night, but Sierra doesn't want to be left alone. And so So, you know, if you put two and two together, that sort of means that we needed to stay and take care of Sierra. So that was kind of overwhelming, because all of a sudden I went from being sort of like an adoptive mom to this new baby to, I felt very, very responsible for Samantha's well-being, and that was going to be my primary role, was to take care of Samantha, and I wasn't going to necessarily get to bond with the baby. And so I was already kind of nervous, like, and totally overwhelmed. I mean, I'd never been through a C-section before. I'm about to go in to support a woman who's I've just met like hours before, go through major surgery. She'd never had surgery before, barely ever been sick in her life, and here she is having major surgery, and wants me to be there. So I go in, and I mean, she was just shaking the whole time. Just, I don't know if it was just from whatever drugs they had to give her, but she was, and there was obviously a lot of pressure and some pain, as my friends who've been through C-sections know. It was, you know, it's not necessarily the most beautiful childbirth experience, but she delivered the baby safely, and that's the most important thing. And so we heard, and Sierra had requested that once the baby was born, she didn't want to see the baby right away, and so they took the baby into another room where Sam was to clean the baby up. And I remember hearing the baby cry for the first time, and you know, that was always such a relief. You know, the baby was crying and healthy. And I remember there was a man sort of standing off to my right, and I remember saying, "Oh, is it a boy?" And he was paused, and he was like, "It's actually looks like a girl." And I was like, "What?" I was not laughing then, and not because I was upset about it being girl, because I love girls, and I love my girl, but Eva, it was just like, sort of like even more overwhelming, just because I didn't expect it. All of this whole experience, I didn't expect a single thing. I didn't expect to be so bonded with the birth mom, to be helping her through labor and delivery, to be sitting with her through a C-section, and then, you know, I was expecting that we'd have little Houston Todd, and out came a little girl. And Sam and I had even talked about, they had asked us, well, do you have a little girl's name picked out just in case? And we were like, sort of, yeah, I guess we do, but I mean, it's a boy, so we're going to worry about it. So anyway, so after the baby was delivered, they ushered me quickly out of the OR, which was, just felt weird to leave her in there by herself, Sierra. So I went into the hall, and Sam was glowing, beaming from seeing his brand, and he was like, "It's a girl, it's a girl." He was so excited. He's like, she's such a little princess. And I mean, he was just like, that was his daughter. And they were rolling her into the nursery, and I remember looking down at her, and for the first time, and she was just perfect. I mean, she was like, just her little features, everything was just so perfect, and she looked exactly like Sierra. Sorry, she looked exactly like her birth mom, and it was just very bizarre to look at this baby and think, this is my baby. When I looked at her, I saw Sierra's baby, and I didn't expect to see that. My expectation was, when I saw my baby for the first time, it would look like it would be my baby. And now I look back and see how that's a blessing to always, I don't always see Sierra when I look at Rose, but it's good that to have that acknowledgement in my own heart that, you know, she has a birth mother, and that she a very brave and strong birth mom. And so that's, you know, and that's what I saw. And I'm so blessed to be able to have that memory, and to be able to share that with Rosie as she gets older. But again, at the time, that's just not what my expectation was, and I was just bawling and bawling, and and the thought of spending yet another night at the hospital basically without any sleep was very overwhelming. And so Sam, in his infinite wisdom, took me home and got me tucked in bed, and then he went, and that was probably around, probably 8 o'clock at night, and then around 8:30 or so, he went back out and he got Sierra food and snacks that she said she wanted, and he drove back to the hospital downtown. This was a very different hospital than anything I had ever been in, and he saw Rosie and spent time with her, and then he went and saw Sierra and spent time with her. She was pretty groggy and out of it a lot of the time because of the major surgery she had just gone through. So anyway, so I was just so impressed with him that night, just how he had just taken all of this in, and I was not handling it all very well emotionally. I was just like a wreck, very overwhelmed, but he was like super dad. He was taking care of me, he was taking care of Rosie, he was taking care of Sierra, you know, I mean, he was just Mr. Superhero adoptive dad. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was going to be the strong one because I was prepared and I knew what was going to happen, and I wasn't, and he totally was, and that was such a huge blessing. The next day we went back, first thing in the morning. We saw Rosie for a little bit. At that point, we had actually, we hadn't really decided on a name. We had a first name. We thought we were going to name her Helen Noel so that she would have my same initials, but when we held her that day, it was just like, it didn't look right. We didn't like the way it sounded, and so we wound up, so we weren't even sure like what we were gonna name her. So then we spent pretty much the rest of the day in Sierra's room, and she said, this is Friday, so this is the day after Rosie was born, and so Sierra was not recovering very well. She had lost a lot of blood, I guess, and they had found out she was anemic. She didn't realize she was anemic, and so they kept checking her, and mid-afternoon they said, you're probably going to need a blood transfusion. You can probably get away without it. They're like, but you're going to feel a lot better, a lot faster, and you'll probably be able to go home a lot sooner if you have the blood transfusion. And when they left, I didn't think it was that big a deal, but Sierra was just devastated. She was like, everything's going wrong, nothing's going right, and we were just there for her, and tried to help her explain that everybody's body is different, and the doctor actually was really sweet too, and she says, this is why we have babies in hospitals, because nothing always goes, she just doesn't always go so smooth some of the time, and this isn't that rare, and especially considering her being anemic. And so she seemed to calm down, and we were with her until they gave her the blood transfusion. At that point, Glenda from the agency had shown up, so we were like, okay, we'll leave her in safe hands with Glenda, and we'll go see Rosie, or at the time it was just the baby, and spend some time. And so we spent some time with the baby, and I was still kind of an emotional wreck just because I felt really stressed out about taking care of Sierra and taking care of the baby, and at the time it just felt like the baby was still an extension of Sierra, and that was just hard because I felt like I didn't feel like I was taking care of Sierra and then I was taking care of my baby. I felt like I was taking care of Sierra and then taking care of Sierra's baby. So that was just really hard, and so on the way out, Sam went back in and checked on Sierra, and I thought that Glenda would still be there, but she wasn't. She had left pretty quickly, and so but Sam was like, you know what, she's okay, we're just gonna go home and get some rest. So that night we went home, and I had kind of a big cry, knowing that, one day I was going to feel connected to the baby and bonded to the baby, but just sad that it wasn't happening yet, and it wasn't going kind of how I thought it would. And I know Sierra was feeling exactly the same way, so, and that day, actually, too, we had asked Sierra if she wanted to see the baby, because the agency told us, oh, it'll be fine, you can take care of Sierra, because you can just bring the baby in Sierra's room, and then you'll all just be in there together, kind of like one big happy family. But that morning I had asked Sierra if she wanted to see the baby, and she, it's very sweet, she looked at me, she said, I trust you guys. And I knew she couldn't see the baby right then. It would just be too hard, and not that I could ever imagine what it would be like to be in her shoes, but in my head, if I had to do that, I would have made the same choice. I mean, who could look at that baby, and then do what she had to do. So we were just in between that day, baby and Sierra, and it was very, just a challenging day. So that night, Sam and I talked about, just our game plan for the next day, because that would have been Saturday, and we expected that Sierra would have been released and Rosie. And that night we talked about her name, and we decided that the name we had picked wasn't going to work, and so we picked Rosie Nicole, because she's in our family, and she's our second girl, and I'm a second girl, so I kind of wanted to have some sort of name connection there, so that, she would know that we have this special thing in common, being a second born girl. And so that's why I wanted to have my same initials originally, but the name just didn't fit, and I said, well, what about Rosie? And that way we can both have flower names, and then she can have my middle name. And Sam gave it some thought, and he was like, yeah, I think Rosie will be good. Rose, and we'll call her Rosie, or Rose, whatever. So we went back, and then she was Rosie, and Sam made it a priority for me to spend time in the nursery with the baby that day, and he spent time with Sierra that day. And he said, you just need a little bit of separation from this situation, and you need some time to bond with Rosie. And I just thought that was a very sweet, sensitive, amazing thing for him to do for me and for Rosie and for Sierra, to make sure that she was still getting taken care of. So that morning I spent in the nursery with Rosie, and he spent time with Sierra, just taking care of her. And he came back to the nursery, and he was like, oh my gosh, she's doing so great. She's walking around. She looks, she's in great spirits. She's just like a whole new woman, and that was a huge relief for me. Anyway, it really was such a relief to know that Sierra was doing okay, and everything was going to be okay. I felt like it was a turning point, and Glenda came and got us later on that day to come say goodbye to Sierra, because she was being released that day. And so we had written her a little note, and we had gotten her a bracelet, and saying goodbye to her was hard. I was kind of already emotionally drained, so in a way I guess that was a blessing, because I just felt kind of spent, and I don't know, it was hard, but it wasn't as like emotional as I thought I was going to be during it. But we hugged, and we prayed, and we gave her our gift, and just said, how thankful we were. And she kept trying to thank us for helping her, and for, it was just, she kept trying to thank us, and I was just like, please stop thanking us. We haven't done anything, and you've done everything. And she gave everything she could possibly give, and she gave it all to us, and she gave us the most amazing adoptive birth story experience you could really ask for, because I know all these details about my daughter's birth, and I didn't even give birth to her. And I mean, what a gift she gave to me, what a gift she gave to Rosie, just by opening her heart to us and opening herself to this kind of help. And it was just a very humbling experience, because she was like, oh, I couldn't have done this alone. I'm so glad you guys were here. And, you know, I just thought, man, if I were in her situation, I'm not sure I would have said thanks, that I wasn't alone. I think I probably would have still felt alone without having, my mom or my, so-and-so here. But she didn't feel alone, and she really felt like she had help from us, and she really felt like we were there for her, and I was just so thankful. And I think that's something I'll always take with me, that God provides the people you need to get through certain situations, and that you're really not alone when He provides for you. So we asked her again if she's sure she didn't want to see the baby, and she said she was sure, and that she'll look at pictures later. And so then we said goodbye to her, and I think we signed a paper or something. She had to sign up quite a bit of papers that day, and she was released, and we went back to see Rosie, who she had, I guess her belly had a lot of gas in it, and they'd done an x-ray already, and they didn't see anything obstructing, and she wasn't fussy, she wasn't in pain. But they decided they wanted to keep her another night, which was like the worst news for us ever, because we felt like we'd been at the hospital for like weeks, even though it had just been a few days. But so we had to leave her there again, and they, at night, and they said, oh, we'll release her in the morning, we'll take another x-ray. Well, took another x-ray. Well, her belly was still full of gas, so they were like, well, we're just going to keep her and observe her the rest of the day. So, and at that point we had run out of childcare options for the elders, as we're now calling them, Liam and Eva. So Sam took them to church, and I was at the hospital by myself, and kind of an emotional wreck, just because I just wanted to get this baby home. And so finally that night, they went, once Glenda, she had to meet us there, because actually at that process they actually released the baby to Glenda, and so Glenda has to walk out with the baby. So so she met us there, and finally at 6 o'clock or some crazy thing on Sunday night, she was released, and is actually the fastest release that I've ever seen, or discharge I've ever seen. And we buckled her up in her car seat and took her on home, and it was amazing. And it was just like almost as soon as I walked in our doors with her, I just felt so much more relaxed, and much more I just okay, now the bonding can finally begin. And I finally started to feel like this was my, our daughter. And it was just a really neat experience. And to have Sam go through all that with me and be such an amazing support and be there for me in ways that I thought I was going to have to be there for him was just incredible, to really see that, God has designed him to be an adoptive dad, and that he had already bonded so quickly, even before we walked through the door, our home doors. That was his baby girl, that was his little princess, and he kept telling me, oh, I can just see her running down the stairs and see her in her, pretty dresses. And at that time it was just so hard for me to picture. I had pictured a baby boy, I hadn't pictured a baby girl. And he had it right away. So it was just a very bonding experience for Sam and I as a couple as well, and something I treasure, even though it was challenging. It's the memory of her birth is something I'll always remember and cherish, just because it's the story of how she came to be our daughter. And it's all because of a very, very brave woman who knew what she wanted for herself and knew what she wanted for her daughter, or, her child at the time. And she just, nothing was going to get her in her way. Even when people tried to tell her, oh, you should keep your baby, you should keep your baby, she knew what she wanted. And she said, my baby will have a financially secure future. And, and that was her goal. And I really think it all came down to, like she said, security and safety, and she knew what she had to do. And I just so admire her for that. And I appreciate what she's given us, and that she's trusted me to be Rosie's mom. And she's such a gift, and we love her. And I'm so thankful for everyone who has really reached out to us through that crazy time through Facebook. It was so encouraging, everyone's prayers and well wishes, because I really needed that. Because it felt like everything was falling apart, but it really wasn't. And it was encouraging to read how excited everybody was. And it's neat to be able to introduce her to people now who have been praying for her and longing for her with us. And I'm excited to be able to take her back home soon and introduce her to all of her family, and just to see how loved she is and how supported our family is for doing this is amazing. I mean, even when we go out, people are so encouraging to us about how great adoption is and how, glad they are and happy they are for us. And so for right now, that's just a huge surprise. I didn't expect to get such an overwhelming amount of support, but I'm so thankful for it. So thankful. And I'm just so, I'm thankful.